Beloved soul, if you found this message today, August 26th, take a quiet moment before you continue. Perhaps something happened recently that you have not stopped thinking about. Maybe you made a decision, ended a conversation, started something new, walked away from something that no longer felt right, or simply chose to trust yourself when you normally would have listened to everyone else. You may not realize it yet, but even small decisions can change the direction of our lives. In this spiritual reflection, Archangel Micheal represents courage, clarity, and strength, so let this message encourage you to look at your recent choices with wisdom rather than fear. The shocking news does not have to mean something frightening. Sometimes unexpected news is simply information that changes your perspective, opens a new possibility, or helps you understand why a recent decision mattered more than you realized. Think about your last important choice. What made you choose it? Was it something you had been thinking about for a long time? Did you finally listen to your own instincts? Did you choose peace instead of an argument? Did you decide to focus on yourself and your goals? Did you finally begin something you had been postponing? Whatever it was, do not underestimate the importance of that moment. Your life is shaped not only by enormous events but by hundreds of small choices that slowly create your direction. Sometimes you make one decision without knowing where it will lead, and later you discover that it introduced you to a person, opportunity, lesson, or experience you could never have predicted. Maybe the unexpected news connected to your recent decision will come through a conversation. Someone may tell you something that gives you a completely different perspective. Perhaps you will discover information that helps you understand a situation more clearly. Maybe an opportunity will appear because you finally took action instead of waiting. Or perhaps you will simply realize that a decision you once questioned was actually an important step toward becoming more confident. Whatever happens, listen carefully and remain calm. You do not need to assume that every unexpected message has a hidden meaning. Pay attention to the facts, think carefully, and give yourself time to understand what you are hearing. Beloved soul, perhaps the deeper message is about trusting yourself without becoming impulsive. There is a difference between listening to your inner voice and making decisions without thinking. Real confidence grows when you combine intuition with wisdom. If something important appears in your life, ask questions. Consider your options. Talk to someone trustworthy if you need another perspective. You do not have to rush simply because something feels exciting or surprising. Your future deserves thoughtful decisions. Maybe your last decision involved letting go of something that had been taking too much of your energy. Perhaps you stopped chasing someone's approval, changed a habit, became more serious about a goal, or decided that your peace deserved greater priority. If so, remember that growth can feel unfamiliar at first. When you change your direction, people may not immediately understand why. You do not have to convince everyone. What matters is that your choices are thoughtful, respectful, and aligned with the person you want to become. And perhaps today brings a reminder that your story is still unfolding. You may think you know what the next few weeks will look like, but life can introduce possibilities you did not plan for. A new conversation can open a door. A new skill can create an opportunity. A simple decision can lead somewhere unexpected. Stay curious, but stay grounded. Hope for something beautiful without demanding that it arrive in one specific form. Take a moment now and ask yourself, what did my last decision teach me about who I am becoming? Maybe it taught you that you are stronger than you thought. Maybe it showed you that you value peace. Maybe it reminded you that you need better boundaries. Maybe it revealed a goal that you genuinely care about. Whatever the answer is, carry that lesson forward. Your next chapter does not need to begin with something dramatic. It can begin with clarity. It can begin with courage. It can begin with one better decision today. And if unexpected news arrives, receive it with an open heart and a clear mind. Take a deep breath and say, I am ready for new understanding. I trust myself to receive unexpected news with peace, wisdom, and gratitude. Beloved soul, perhaps your last decision is still on your mind because something about it felt different from the choices you normally make. Maybe you finally said yes to something you had been afraid to begin, or perhaps you chose to step back from something that was draining your peace. Maybe you made a decision about your future, your work, your goals, your relationships, or simply about how you want to spend your time. Whatever that decision was, do not immediately judge it by the result you can see today. Some decisions take time to reveal their value. A choice can feel small in the moment and still become important later because it changes what you do next. Your life is not shaped by one dramatic event alone. It is shaped by the direction created through hundreds of choices, and sometimes one decision becomes the point where you finally stop repeating an old pattern and begin moving differently. Perhaps you have been waiting for confirmation that you made the right choice. You may have replayed the situation in your mind, wondering whether you should have chosen differently or whether things would have been easier if you had waited longer. But constantly questioning yourself cannot change what has already happened. What you can do is learn from the decision and observe what happens next. If the choice was thoughtful, responsible, and aligned with your values, give yourself permission to move forward. You do not need to keep reopening the same decision every day. Learn what you can, adjust if necessary, and continue. Sometimes confidence does not come from knowing that every decision will be perfect. It comes from knowing that you can handle the consequences, learn from mistakes, and make better choices as you grow. Maybe the unexpected news connected to your last decision will come from someone you did not expect to hear from. Perhaps a conversation will reveal information you did not know before. Maybe someone will recognize an effort you have been making quietly. Maybe an opportunity will appear because you finally took one step instead of remaining in the same place. Or perhaps the news will simply confirm something you have already begun to understand about yourself. Whatever form it takes, do not allow the word "shocking" to make you expect something frightening. Unexpected does not always mean negative. Sometimes the most surprising news is something encouraging, something that opens your perspective, or something that helps you understand why a particular experience happened. Beloved soul, maybe your last decision was actually about choosing yourself in a healthier way. Perhaps you decided that you would stop comparing your progress with other people. Maybe you decided to focus on learning instead of worrying about whether you were already good enough. Maybe you decided to communicate honestly rather than keeping everything inside. Maybe you chose to spend your time more carefully. These decisions may not look impressive to everyone else, but they can completely change the way you experience your life. When you begin respecting your own time, energy, goals, and boundaries, you naturally become more selective about what deserves your attention. That does not mean becoming distant or uncaring. It means learning that your life also deserves your care. There may also be a person connected to your recent decision, and perhaps you are wondering what their response will be. If so, remember that you cannot control another person's reaction. You can communicate respectfully, explain yourself when necessary, and listen to their perspective, but you cannot force someone to understand everything immediately. Give relationships room to develop through real conversations and consistent actions. If someone genuinely cares about you, they will have an opportunity to show that through how they communicate and treat you over time. You do not need to create conclusions before you have enough information. Maybe today's message is asking you to recognize a pattern that has been repeating in your life. Perhaps you keep waiting for the perfect moment before beginning. Maybe you keep doubting yourself after every mistake. Maybe you constantly seek approval before trusting your own judgment. Or perhaps you give so much attention to what other people are doing that you forget to focus on your own path. Your last decision may have been important because it interrupted one of these patterns. You chose differently. You responded differently. You finally realized that repeating the same behavior will usually produce the same result. That realization itself can become the beginning of something new. And if you are waiting for a specific opportunity, prepare instead of simply hoping. Learn the skills you need. Organize your priorities. Improve your communication. Take care of your responsibilities. Build healthy habits. Speak to people who have experience. The future becomes easier to navigate when you prepare for possibilities before they appear. You cannot control exactly when an opportunity arrives, but you can control whether you are ready to recognize it and respond wisely. Perhaps the greatest surprise waiting for you is not something happening outside you, but something you discover within yourself. Maybe you will realize that you are more capable than you believed. Maybe you will discover that you can handle uncertainty without immediately becoming overwhelmed. Maybe you will notice that you no longer need certain people's approval. Maybe you will understand that your definition of success has changed. These realizations can feel surprising because they reveal that you have grown quietly. So today, August 26th, do not spend your entire day waiting for a dramatic announcement. Pay attention to the real moments around you. Listen carefully when someone speaks. Notice opportunities. Think before making important choices. Appreciate the people who support you. And remember the decision that brought you here. Ask yourself what it taught you and what you want your next decision to represent. Maybe your last decision was not the ending you thought it was. Maybe it was simply the first step toward understanding something more clearly. Maybe it opened a new direction. Maybe it helped you recognize what you truly value. Maybe it gave you the courage to stop standing still. Take a deep breath and say, I trust the lessons of my journey. I am ready for new understanding, positive change, and the next step of my life. Beloved soul, perhaps you have reached this part because something inside you is still asking a simple question: what did my last decision actually change? Maybe you made a choice recently and have not yet seen its full result. You may have chosen to walk away from an old habit, focus on yourself, begin something you had been postponing, speak honestly, or stop allowing other people's opinions to control your direction. At the time, it may have felt like an ordinary decision, but sometimes the smallest choices become turning points because they change what we do next. You may not immediately see the result, but your direction can change long before your circumstances do. That is why you should not judge your progress only by what is visible today. Sometimes the first sign of change is simply the way you begin thinking differently. Perhaps you have been waiting for someone else to confirm that you made the right choice, but there comes a moment when you have to learn how to trust your own thoughtful judgment. This does not mean ignoring advice or refusing to listen. It means gathering information, considering the consequences, listening to people you trust, and then making a decision that reflects your values. If you made a mistake, you can learn from it. If something needs to be corrected, you can correct it. You are not trapped by one decision. Your life continues to give you opportunities to adjust. This is important because sometimes we become so afraid of making the wrong choice that we become afraid to make any choice at all. But growth requires movement. You do not need perfect certainty before taking every step. You need enough understanding to take the next responsible step. Maybe the unexpected news connected to your last decision will not be something dramatic. Perhaps someone will tell you something that gives you a completely different perspective. Perhaps an opportunity will appear because you finally took action. Perhaps you will discover information that helps you understand why a certain situation unfolded the way it did. Or maybe you will simply recognize that the decision gave you something more valuable than an immediate result: clarity. Sometimes we make a choice and discover what we truly want only afterward. That is still progress. You learn what feels right, what does not fit, what deserves your energy, and what you no longer want to repeat. Every experience can give you information if you are willing to learn from it. Beloved soul, perhaps your last decision involved a relationship. Maybe you decided to communicate honestly, create healthier boundaries, stop chasing someone's attention, or give yourself space to understand your own feelings. If so, remember that relationships cannot be controlled by one person. You can be honest, kind, respectful, and patient, but you cannot decide how another person will respond. Let their actions provide information. If someone values your connection, consistency and respect will eventually show that. If someone needs space, respect it. If something is unclear, communicate rather than assuming. You do not need to turn every interaction into a prediction about your future. Let relationships develop naturally, because genuine connection becomes stronger through honesty and time. Maybe your last decision was connected to your dreams. Perhaps you finally decided to take a goal seriously. You may have started learning something, improving a skill, organizing your priorities, or taking the first step towards something you once believed was too difficult. Do not underestimate that beginning. A person does not become successful simply because they suddenly receive an opportunity. They become ready through preparation. Every hour you spend learning, every mistake you correct, and every time you continue after disappointment can prepare you for possibilities that have not appeared yet. Your future may contain opportunities you cannot see today, but your job is not to predict them perfectly. Your job is to become ready. And maybe the biggest surprise is that you are beginning to recognize your own strength. Perhaps there was a time when you needed everyone to reassure you before you believed in yourself. Maybe now you are learning to make decisions with greater confidence. You are learning that being uncertain does not mean being incapable. You can be nervous and still take a step. You can have questions and still move forward. You can make a mistake and still recover. This is real strength. Strength is not pretending that everything is easy. Strength is continuing to learn when things are difficult. Today, August 26th, allow yourself to stop looking backward for too long. Your past can teach you, but it does not need to control your next chapter. If your last decision taught you something, carry the lesson. If it revealed a mistake, correct it. If it showed you what matters, protect it. If it opened a new possibility, explore it carefully. And if it simply reminded you that you are capable of choosing differently, then let that realization become the beginning of a healthier direction. Perhaps the unexpected news you are waiting for will arrive through something ordinary, a conversation, a message, an opportunity, a new idea, or a realization. Whatever comes, receive it calmly. You do not need to rush because a title says, "Open now." Your future deserves thoughtful choices, not pressure. Listen carefully. Think clearly. Ask questions when necessary. Allow yourself to understand before deciding what something means. And if nothing dramatic happens today, that does not mean this message was meaningless. Maybe the real change is already happening within you. Maybe you are becoming more patient. Maybe you are learning to protect your peace. Maybe you are becoming more serious about your goals. Maybe you are finally realizing that your worth does not depend on another person's approval. Those changes can eventually become more powerful than any single piece of news. So take a deep breath and say, "I am ready for new understanding. I trust my growth, I trust my wisdom, and I am open to positive change." Beloved soul, as you reach this final part, remember that the most important message may not be about predicting one specific event. It may be about understanding the person you are becoming because of the decisions you have made. Your last decision may have felt ordinary when you made it, but perhaps it forced you to recognize what you truly value. Maybe you chose peace instead of unnecessary conflict. Maybe you decided to take your goals more seriously. Maybe you stopped waiting for someone else's approval. Maybe you finally admitted that something was no longer working for you and decided to make a healthier change. These moments can be powerful because they show that you are capable of changing your direction. You do not have to know exactly where the road ends before taking the next step. Sometimes clarity comes after movement. Sometimes you understand why a decision mattered only after you have lived with it for a while. So do not judge your choice too quickly. Give yourself time to observe, learn, and grow. Perhaps there is something about your recent decision that you still question. Maybe you wonder whether you acted too quickly, whether you should have waited, or whether another choice would have produced a better result. If you made a responsible decision with the information you had at the time, do not spend every day punishing yourself for not knowing what you could only discover later. Nobody has complete knowledge of the future. We make decisions with what we know, and then life gives us new information. When new information arrives, we adjust. That is not failure. That is maturity. You are allowed to change your mind when circumstances change. You are allowed to learn something new and choose differently. You are allowed to admit that you misunderstood something and make a better decision now. Your ability to adapt is one of your greatest strengths. Maybe the unexpected news connected to your last decision will come through an opportunity that you never expected. Perhaps someone will introduce you to a new possibility. Maybe a conversation will reveal information that changes your perspective. Perhaps something you started recently will begin showing signs of progress. Or maybe you will discover that the decision gave you more freedom than you realized. Sometimes the best outcomes do not arrive exactly as we imagine them. You may be waiting for one particular door to open while another opportunity quietly appears beside you. That is why it is important to remain curious. Do not become so attached to one expected outcome that you fail to recognize something valuable because it looks different. Beloved soul, if your recent decision involved another person, remember that healthy relationships require space for both people to be honest. You cannot control another person's thoughts, emotions, or choices. And they cannot control yours. You can communicate clearly. You can show respect. You can explain your intentions. You can listen. But after that, allow people to respond in their own way. Do not spend hours trying to interpret every message or every small change in someone's behavior. Look at patterns rather than isolated moments. Consistency tells you more than one conversation. Respect tells you more than dramatic promises. If a relationship is meaningful, allow it to develop through time and mutual effort rather than pressure. Perhaps your last decision was actually about choosing yourself in a healthier way. Maybe you realized that you were spending too much time comparing yourself with others. Maybe you decided to stop measuring your progress against someone else's timeline. Maybe you started focusing on what you can control instead of worrying about what you cannot. These changes can create a completely different emotional experience. You begin to understand that another person's success does not make your own journey less valuable. Someone else's timeline does not determine yours. You are allowed to learn at your own pace. You are allowed to start again. You are allowed to become better without needing to become exactly like someone else. Maybe you have also been carrying an old version of yourself into situations that no longer require it. Perhaps you still think of yourself as the person who was afraid, uncertain, or inexperienced, even though you have learned much since then. Give yourself permission to recognize your growth. Look at the things you can handle today that once felt impossible. Look at the responsibilities you have learned to manage. Look at the conversations you can now have with greater maturity. Look at the goals you understand more clearly. Growth can be quiet, and because it happens gradually, we sometimes fail to notice it. But quiet growth is still growth. And perhaps today's unexpected news is connected to a realization you are about to have about your own future. You may realize that you want to learn something new. You may discover that a certain goal matters more than you thought. You may understand that a relationship needs more honest communication. You may decide that your time should be spent differently. These realizations can feel surprising because they change what you thought you wanted. But changing your direction after learning more about yourself is not weakness. It is wisdom. Archangel Micheal, in this spiritual reflection, represents courage and clarity. Let those qualities guide you when something unexpected appears. Courage means you can face uncertainty without allowing it to control you. Clarity means you can separate facts from assumptions. If you receive important information, listen carefully. If someone offers you an opportunity, understand the details. If a decision has consequences, consider them. If you need guidance, speak with someone trustworthy. You do not have to make every important choice alone, and you do not have to make it immediately. Beloved soul, perhaps the most beautiful part of your next chapter will be the way you respond to unexpected moments. You cannot control everything that happens, but you can control your response. If good news arrives, receive it with gratitude. If something confusing happens, seek clarity. If an opportunity appears, prepare yourself before committing. If a plan changes, adjust. If you make a mistake, learn. If something does not work, do not automatically assume that your entire future has failed. One moment does not define your whole story. So today, August 26th, let this message be a reminder to move forward with an open heart and a clear mind. You do not need to wait for a dramatic sign before believing that change is possible. You can begin with one decision. One conversation. One lesson. One new habit. One responsible step toward a meaningful goal. Your future is built through these moments. Maybe the shocking news will simply be that something you once thought was impossible is actually possible when you approach it differently. Maybe you will discover that the answer you wanted was not where you expected it to be. Maybe you will realize that you were waiting for someone else to change when the person who needed to make a decision was you. Maybe you will understand that peace is not something another person gives you. It is something you can build through the choices you make every day. And perhaps that is why your last decision matters. It represents movement. It represents the fact that you are no longer standing exactly where you were before. You have learned something. You have experienced something. You have chosen something. Now you have the opportunity to decide what comes next. Do not allow urgency to steal your peace. A title can create curiosity, but your real life deserves patience and wisdom. If you genuinely need to make an important decision today, take the time to understand it. If something feels confusing, ask questions. If you are unsure, talk to someone you trust. You can remain spiritually hopeful while also staying grounded in reality. Take a deep breath and say, I am ready for new understanding. I am open to positive change, wise decisions, and beautiful new possibilities. I trust myself to take the next step with courage and clarity. And remember, beloved soul, your last decision does not have to be perfect to become meaningful. It only needs to teach you something. If it brought you closer to understanding yourself, it was valuable. If it showed you what you need to change, it was valuable. If it helped you recognize what truly matters, it was valuable. Your journey is not about making every choice perfectly. It is about becoming wiser through the choices you make. So walk forward today without demanding that the entire future reveal itself at once. You only need the next step. Let tomorrow bring tomorrow's information. Let new opportunities reveal themselves naturally. Let people show you who they are through their actions. Let your goals develop through consistent effort. Let your mind become calmer as you learn to focus on what you can control. And let your heart remain open to the possibility that something beautiful can come from a decision you once thought was simply ordinary. Like, comment and subscribe for more uplifting spiritual messages.